Captain Marcus Webb stood at the altar of the Zynthian ceremonial hall, his jaw clenched so tight he thought his teeth might crack. The translator implant behind his ear buzzed with the melodic hum of the officiant's words, but Marcus barely heard them. All he could focus on was the woman, no, the being standing beside him. Kalara was tall, nearly 7 feet, with skin that shimmered like oil on water, shifting between deep purples and blues. Her eyes, 3 of them arranged in a triangle on her face, blinked independently. She was, by human standards, utterly alien, and according to her species' life cycle, she was 53 years old to his 23. This wasn't love. This was diplomacy. This was survival. The war had lasted 6 years. Humanity, fresh off achieving faster-than-light travel, had stumbled into Zynthian space like children wandering into a tiger's den. The Zynthians were ancient, powerful, and utterly unimpressed with the young species that had violated their borders. Earth's fleets were decimated in the first year. By year 3, humanity was facing extinction. Then came the treaty. The Accords of Theta Centauri. A peace so fragile it required the most sacred bond known to Zynthian culture: marriage. Political marriages between species, binding families, creating ties that even war couldn't easily sever. Marcus had been volunteered by Earth's desperate government. A decorated officer, young enough to have decades ahead of him, old enough to understand the stakes. Kalara, he'd learned, was a widow, a high-ranking military commander who'd lost her mate in the war's early days, a war sparked by human ignorance. "Do you accept this bond?" The officiant asked, the translator rendering the guttural Zynthian language into flat English. "I do," Marcus said, the words tasting like ash. Kalara's 3 eyes focused on him simultaneously. "I do," she replied, her voice surprisingly soft. The crowd erupted in harmonious humming, Zynthian applause. Marcus felt like a prisoner being led to execution. The first month was hell. They shared a residence on Zynthia Prime, a crystalline structure that seemed to grow from the planet's surface rather than being built. Kalara gave him his space, communicating only when necessary. At night, Marcus would stand on the balcony, staring at the unfamiliar constellations, wondering if he'd made the biggest mistake of humanity's short spacefaring history. But Kalara was not what he expected. She didn't demand anything from him. No intimacy, no false affection. She simply existed alongside him, going about her duties as a military advisor to the Zynthian Council. Sometimes he'd catch her watching Earth broadcast he'd play. Old movies, news reports, music. She never commented, but her eyes would track the images with something that looked like curiosity. One evening, Marcus found her in the kitchen, if you could call the nutrient synthesis chamber a kitchen, struggling with a device. "Problem?" he asked, more out of boredom than concern. "I'm attempting to replicate a dish from your world," she said, her translator rendering frustration in her tone. "Your databases describe something called coffee. I wish to understand why humans risk sleep deprivation for it." Despite himself, Marcus laughed. It was the first genuine laugh he'd had in months. "Here," he said, moving closer. "Let me show you." That night they sat together sipping terrible Zynthian approximated coffee, and for the first time they talked. Really talked. Kalara told him about her previous mate, about the grief that still haunted her, about how she'd volunteered for this marriage not out of duty alone, but because she'd lost everything in the war and wanted it to mean something. "I didn't want this either," she admitted, her eyes dimming, a sign of sadness he'd learned. "But perhaps we can make it tolerable." "Tolerable," Marcus echoed, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, maybe we can." 6 months in, everything changed. A radical faction of Zynthians, the purists, rejected the peace. They launched an attack on the council chambers, intent on assassinating the mixed-species couples and reigniting the war. Marcus and Kalara were on the target list. The attack came at night. Armed insurgents breached their residence, plasma weapons blazing. Marcus, trained for combat, grabbed the nearest weapon, a ceremonial Zynthian blade from their wedding, and fought alongside Kalara. She was magnificent. 53 years old by human reckoning, but a Zynthian in her prime. She moved with grace and deadly precision, her 3 eyes tracking multiple threats simultaneously. But when she took a plasma bolt to the shoulder protecting Marcus, everything crystallized for him. "Kalara!" He caught her as she stumbled, his combat training kicking in. "Stay with me." "Foolish human," she whispered, her blood silvery and luminescent, staining his hands. You were the target. Why did I? Because we're married, remember? Marcus said, surprising himself with the ferocity in his voice. And I don't leave family behind. He fought like a man possessed, covering her while calling for emergency services. When the council's security forces finally arrived, they found Marcus standing over Kalara's body, covered in both purple Zynthian blood and the silvery blood of his wife, having killed 5 insurgents. At the hospital, while Kalara underwent regeneration therapy, the truth struck Marcus like a hammer. He cared, deeply. This alien woman, 30 years his senior, had become more than a political arrangement. She'd become his partner, his friend, his family. When she woke, her 3 eyes found him immediately. You stayed, she whispered. Of course I stayed, Marcus said, taking her hand, 4 fingers, slightly cool to the touch but hers. You took a hit for me. Besides, someone has to teach you how to make proper coffee. For the first time, he saw a Zynthian smile, a subtle softening around the eyes, a slight luminescence to the skin. Perhaps, she said slowly, this marriage can be more than tolerable. Yeah, Marcus agreed, squeezing her hand. Maybe it can. Years later, when historians wrote about the Accords of Theta Centauri, they would note that Marcus and Kalara's union became the template for successful human-Zynthian integration. They had 3 children, hybrids that possessed the best of both species. Marcus became an ambassador, Kalara a peace negotiator. But more importantly, they'd proven something neither species expected. That family wasn't about age or species or even initial choice. It was about showing up, day after day, and choosing each other. And in the vast darkness of space, that choice made all the difference.